You're listening to The Hikam with Shaykh Zahir Bacchus of the Lotri Foundation. In this podcast, Shaykh Zahir explains the aphorisms from Ibn Ata'illah's famous book of wisdoms, Al-Hikam Al-Ata'iyah, a classical manual of spiritual development. Visit seekershub.org for online courses, our reliable answer service, and engaging media.
صلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما بفضلك وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. So we're in the 22nd hikmah in the hikmah of Ibn Ata'illah, which is a book on one's drawing closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and bettering one's relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he says, he said, ما من نفس تبديه إلا وله قدر فيك يمديه. So he said, Ibn Ata'illah, Shaykh, he says, not a breath, ma min nafasin, not a breath do you take except that he makes something that he has destined to you to occur. Ma min nafasin tubdihi, that not a breath do you start or that you take, illa walahu qadrun fika yumdihi, except that there is a something that has been destined to you, that he makes something destined to you to occur. What does it mean? What it means is that we take breath. Nafas here, it means breath that you breathe. Every time the person who's alive, they breathe out breath, and they exhale and they inhale. At every moment that you breathe, that there's that you exhale and that you inhale, every single moment, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there is something destined. There's a decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala every moment with that breath. Something is happening, or something Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is causing. One of the things that He causes with the breath that you take is whether you live or whether you die, whether this is your last moment on earth or whether this is one of your last moment. This is all decreed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It has nothing to do with us. So the breaths that we take, it could be our final one. Could be. Every breath could be our final breath. Or it could be the 1,000,000th breath left that we have. It could be the 1,000,000th breath that we have. But we don't know. And in every moment there is qadr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. With that decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala comes His infinite knowledge of what will occur or what will happen or what has happened. It's in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala infinite knowledge. Every breath that we take, something is ordained by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Things that we know that are ordained and we see that happens right in front of us, and things that we don't know that has been ordained that we're oblivious of or that we have no knowledge of. But at every moment there is something being ordained by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, being decreed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's in His knowledge. That's in His knowledge, and it comes into existence after it was in the alam al-ghayb, after it was unseen. So there are things that come in that are ordained that we see, that has ithar, that is made apparent, and then there are things that are not seen with the breath that we take. Perhaps the breath that we take leads us to good health, or perhaps the breath that we take would have brought upon us illnesses or sicknesses. Nasrul Afiyah. We don't know sometimes what it is, but we can make every breath and moment count. The point of Ibn Ata'illah, there's a couple of points that he's making. And the points that he's making is for the servant to realize that not everything is not in our hands. Everything is not in our hands. The fact that we have breaths that we're taking is not in our hands. It's not in our hands. That we have another breath to breathe is not in our hands. It's not. You cannot tell your lungs to keep exhaling and inhaling. You can't. We're not in control of it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in control of it. You can't tell your heart to stop beating and it stops. You're not in control of it. We're not in control of it. You can't tell your blood to stop flowing. We're not in control of it. All of that matter is in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and He ordains it, He decrees it at every moment. He decrees that your blood flows at every moment. He decrees or ordains that your lungs work to give you oxygen. He decrees and He ordains, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that you have a next breath to take. That's the ordainment and the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So at every moment there's something destined to you and it occurs. At every moment there's something that is destined that occurs in you, that occurs around you, in you, fika, he says, without you having anything to do with it. So the servant has to realize that the moments that he has are moments that Allah has allowed him to have. They're moments that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has allowed him to have. And they're moments that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed tremendous blessings in it for him to have or her to have. And so the servant, every breath that they take, there is obviously a decree, an ordainment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala carries out whatever He wills to be through His infinite knowledge, through Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala infinite knowledge of that servant and their moments. So all moments in time, all moments requires something that is obligatory, perhaps. There's rites that are obligatory that the servant has to perform. And there's rites that Allah has made obligatory for the servant to undertake at all moments and of those times. And so the servant is responsible for the completion of these rites, or for these rites. And his series of breaths that are entrusted to him belong to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as the ulama they say. The breaths that you have belong not to yourself. The breaths that you have belong to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because He gives it to you. You don't give it to yourself. Your breaths that you breathe is not given to you by yourself. It's given to you by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So He is the owner of your breaths. He's the owner of your breaths. As the owner of the breaths, He can determine what He wants you to do in that moment. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made things obligatory for us to do in our moments. And He's made things that are sunnah for us to do. One of the things Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made obligatory for us to do in our moments is belief. That's obligatory. What is obligatory for the servant who wants success, at every moment that he gives you a breath, is the moment that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made obligatory for you to believe in Him at every moment. And so the servant has to have that consciousness in his heart of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala every moment. And then hope that his last moment, and this was the dua of the Prophet ﷺ, to make his ending, make it a good ending. Make his ending a good ending, and make his last breath the best breath. And to put on his tongue in his last breath the shahada, the witnessing of the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. These are the things that the Prophet ﷺ made dua for. And when he would go to people's bedside, and it is a sunnah of this, when you go to someone who is on their deathbed, they're ill, or they're in their last stages of their life, on their deathbed, you encourage them to say the Shahada. You keep encouraging them to say, why? Because if they're going to breathe their last breath, they breathe it by what? Confirmation and affirmation of their belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Of their belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so, Ibn Ata'illah is saying what? He's saying that there are things destined to you that occurs at every moment. At every moment. So one has to watch over each and every moment that you have. Because it could be your last. So what do you want to put in that moment is a determination of yourself. What do you want to put in that moment? If this is your last breath, or if this is your last moment, what do you want your heart to have contained? What is it that you want your heart to contain if this is your last moment? Or if this is the last words that you speak? What is it that you want to go to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as the last word that you speak? And if we think like this, then a lot of the things that we say, we would not say. A lot of things that we do, we would not do. Because we would not want it to be the last thing that we said. Or we would not want it to be the last thing that we did. Or we would not want it to be the last thing that our mind is upon. Or we wouldn't want it to be the last thing that our hearts are inclined towards. Or our hearts are attached to. It wouldn't. If the servant wants and knows and has that realization that every moment is a moment which could be his last, if every servant understands that every single moment could be his last, then that servant, with that realization, then would be careful about the moments that he has, or that she has. They would be very careful. They would be very careful at how they spent their last moments, or how they spent every single moment. And they certainly would not want their moment to escape in the form of ghafla, in the form of heedlessness. Or heedlessness, ghafla, is not is without consciousness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Without being conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They would not want their moments to be like this. And they would be contented. One of the things of their moments is that they have contentment of what? The contentment that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is decreeing at every moment something to occur in them. So even if destruction or difficulty is decreed, even if something difficult is decreed in that moment, they would meet it with a smiling face. They would meet it happily, with contentment. They would be contented. Their contentment is based on that it is Allah who has decreed it or ordained it. It's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who has decreed it. It's His qadr. It's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so even with difficulties, they would meet it with rida, with contentment. They would have contentment. And their contentment lies in the fact that they have that understanding that it's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who has decreed in that moment what has occurred. In that moment, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has decreed this to occur to them. And so part of them is that they have contentment. Their whole of them is they're contented. Why? Because of the recognition that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has decreed it. That it's their Lord who's in charge of their affairs. It's their Lord who's in charge of their breaths. It's their Lord who's in charge of their of everything that will come to be, or everything that happens. And so the servant who's traveling to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the servant who watches their moments. They watch their breath. They watch it. And as a servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they make the most out of their moments. They don't waste it. The servant who who wants closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they don't waste their moments. They don't waste their moments. They're not wasteful of the moments that they have with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They make the most out of their moment. So that if this was their last moment, they would not regret that they did not do something that they should have done. That they should not have regret. But this is a servant who is traveling. It's hard. One has to, it's easier the older you get. It is. It's easier the older you get, because the older you get, the more understanding comes to you that this may be your last, that your moments are numbered. The older you get, the more you understand that your moments are more numbered. But at any time, the breath that we breathe could be our last. At any time, our breaths that we breathe could be our last. If that is the case, and you have that realization of that, and everyone knows death can come to us, but not everyone has. There's knowledge of something, and there's the realization of it. We can have knowledge about lots of things. People have knowledge that you have to pray. How many people pray? Hopefully a lot. There is knowledge people have that salah is 27 times better in the masjid. People have that knowledge. But the masjid is not full at all the salah. People have that knowledge. But you don't see it. People have the knowledge that backbiting is haram. It's like eating the flesh of your brother. But people commit it. People have that knowledge. People have the knowledge that drinking is haram in Islam. There are Muslims who drink. They have the knowledge. Knowledge is one thing. Realization of it is something else. You can have all the knowledge in the world, and it will not benefit you until you have realization of it. What is realization of it? Realization of it is that you do something about it. That's the realization of it. And if you know that at any moment could be your last, what is it that you're going to do about it? You can say that, well, death can come to us at any time. That's great. You can say it until you're blue in the face. You can say it 1,000 times. What are you doing about it? Have you realized it? Has it become a reality to you? Because if you realize it, then you would do something. It would force you to act or not act in certain ways. It would force you to do something. You would do something about it. And so knowledge is we take it, and then we have to have realization of it. And realization is an application of it. Is real application of it. And the application of it is what forces us and drives us. That's realization. Is the knowledge then drives us to do something. That's the realization. And so the servant has to go to that. We have to go to that. We have to go from knowledge, just for the sake of knowledge and understanding, to where we are doing something with that knowledge, in which we're doing something with that knowledge. So don't let your moments escape you, finding you in the state of heedlessness. That's what Ibn Ata'illah is saying. One of the things that he's saying in this hikmah. Don't let it escape you. Don't let your moments come without the understanding that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not witnessing and apparent, and has ordained or decreed something in that moment for you to do, or has ordained something to occur to you. He has. And so what do you want to do with that moment is up to you. What you want to do in that moment is then up to you. And so mind your moments, and if you're mindful of your moments, then you put something that is blessed, and hopefully Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepts it. And if it is our last moment, then we hope that it becomes our best moment, and it becomes the moment that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala helps us and gives us through His mercy, puts us into success in the akhirah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help us. guide us, forgive us, have mercy upon us. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect our elders, our parents, give them good health, long life. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala elevate us in this world, next world, grant us success. Protect our children, give them success in this world and next world. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keep them on the straight path. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make their akhlaq that of his companions and that of the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help them and forgive them, have mercy upon them, those who are faced with difficulties. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala remove their difficulties, ease their difficulty, make their difficulties easy and facilitate it with ease. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us, protect our children, protect our families, protect our homes. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect the mu'mineen. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect all the brothers and our sisters and our children. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make our homes amongst the homes of the believers and make our last words our best words. Subhanak wa hamdik, shadu wa la ilaha illa anta, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Amin.
Thank you for listening to The Hikam with Shaykh Zahir Bacchus. Help Seekers Hub spread the light of guidance to millions around the world by supporting us through monthly donations by going to seekershub.org/donate. Your donations are tax deductible in the US and Canada.